Good afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to our first webinar of 2021. Welcome to all the people who is with us today. We are going to have a great presentation with Professor Claudia Suescun. We are going to start in a second, so we will be back with you in a moment. Thank you.
Grande a nivel institucional, contando con la siguiente participación. En las actividades que se hacen en articulación con la biblioteca y algunos programas de posgrado, tenemos el A Tomar Café, los bazares literarios y los webinars, con una participación de 488 personas durante. Se realizaron talleres de prevención con diferentes temáticas en articulación con el área de formación sociohumanística, especialmente con los estudiantes.
Pronuncia esos webinars como si fuera de huevón.
Todo el mundo, sí.
Ella.
Well, welcome. Once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar that as a copy is presenting you this year. We are going to be with a webinar every Thursday, every month. So you are welcome to join us and be part of this great activity that we are prepared for you. So today we are going to start with a wonderful topic, and we have, of course, great presenter. She is Claudia Suescun, Professor Claudia Suescun. She is a full-time professor at Luis Amigo University. She holds an undergraduate degree in EFL teaching and a master's degree in neuropsychopedagogy from the same institution. So welcome, Professor Claudia. For us, it's a pleasure to have you here to share this interesting topic. You are going to be talking, or the name of our webinar today is Our Brain at Work, Reading and Writing in EFL. So welcome.
Thank you very much for this lovely invitation. It is a pleasure to be with you here today. I hope that the hour or so that we're going to spend together is a productive one. The reason why I chose this particular webinar to start the year is because so many of us have struggled during our teaching practices with these processes of reading and writing. And sometimes we look for solutions wherever we can find them. I happened to find a couple of solutions and a couple of strategies that might be useful in the way that our brain works, which is why the particular title of this presentation is Our Brain at Work. So what happens? What happens in our brain when we read? What happens in our brain when we write? Okay, so I will try to give you a few considerations of what happens. I'm not going to get very technical because um, it is not our job to know the names of the different brain regions, but it is our job to know how overall these processes work in the brain and the way in which we can enhance them or help them in order for our students to become successful readers and writers. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Okay, can you please confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, Professor, you can see.
Yes,
Thank you very much. So again, the title of this presentation is called Our Brain at Work, Reading and Writing in EFL. And I want to begin with what do we know? Okay, what do we know about which cognitive processes do you associate with reading and writing? So I want to hear from you. What do you think happens, or which brain areas get activated? Which processes happen when we are reading and writing? What happens to our brain? It can be in the chat, or you are welcome to turn on your microphone. Okay, so we have working memory, which is basically the ability to move from short to long-term memory. Okay, so this is one of the processes that is involved. Motor skills, of course, because not only when we are writing, a lot of people think that motor skills are only when we are writing. But it happens also when we are reading because we are moving our eyes. We predict, infer, extrapolate exactly. So that is why we also have our executive functions at work because we are predicting what is going to happen in a text, or we are organizing also. So this also addresses attention, of course, and a particular type of attention that is sustained attention. The prefrontal cortex is in action. Yes, Juliana, that is correct because we have our executive functions at work: planning, organizing, predicting, evaluating. Creativity and attention, of course, particularly when we are writing. Morphological and semantic awareness, okay, because we do not only have um, the oral component of words, which is, and we're going to talk about it in some minutes, the phonological awareness. Okay, but we also derive meaning from those structures. Okay, very good. Anything else that you think we didn't mention? Perception, of course, it is the first thing that is because we are using our senses. So our agnosias, our perceptions are um, are at work here. Okay, thank you very much for your contributions, analyzing our own knowledges, our biases, our preconceptions. Okay, so again, this is all of these associated with our executive functions, which are mostly located to the prefrontal cortex. We refer to our fonts of knowledge, to our mnemonic structures of the brain. Okay, we have also process of decoding. Somebody told me in private. Okay, because we are going from something that is written to something that is uh, in a way being spoken in our brain. Okay, so we're going to move to this in a moment. So I'm going to, sorry, now I'm going to open up my presentation so you can see it better. Okay, so um, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear that. All right. So when we learn to read, we have basically one of the key elements is the development of phonological awareness. So let me give you like a very brief explanation of what is phonological awareness. What happens? Okay, we are taking a look at some written words, but in languages, especially like in languages like English, okay, not what is written does not exactly correspond to what is being said. Okay, so when we, for example, when we read a text aloud, the letters are not the exact phonemes that we articulate. Okay, so this in our brain, in our mind, when we read aloud, we hear this voice inside our head that is reading the words to us. This is what we, or what is being proposed as that phonological awareness, okay? That voice in our head that is decoding from written form to spoken or to auditive form. So some research has a focus on the differences between the Chinese versus Phoenician reading acquisition. I want to stop here for a little bit. Okay, Chinese or well, Chinese reading acquisition is when the language is not alphabetical. Okay, so when we have ideograms or symbols that might represent sounds, syllables, entire words, or even in some cases, entire sentences. Okay, so that will be the Chinese type of reading acquisition versus Phoenician, that is what we call the alphabetic languages. Okay, so that visual versus auditory recognition, as I told you before, is what we call phonological awareness. So Stewart in 2006 says that regardless of the phonetic transparency of the language, both systems, the Chinese versus the Phoenician reading acquisition style and strategies, have proven to be effective. Okay, so do we start with the sounds in like the way that we do it in most Western countries, that we use phonics to teach reading and writing, okay? Uh, or in some other cases, we use other instruction that begins with the letter itself and not with the sound of the letter. Okay, so both systems, both beginning with the written form or beginning with the sounds, have proven to be effective in children. Okay, and furthermore, research has also shown us that there is activation in the areas of the brain that are related to phonological awareness, even in deaf children. So even deaf children can benefit and can learn to read using that phonological awareness, even if they are not able to hear. Okay, so this is very interesting because it implies that all reading processes demand a certain degree of phonological awareness. Okay, and that this is just um, it's just um, one of the components that is always present in a reading and writing process. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so what are some of the other implications of phonological awareness? We need to have to expose our students to listening skills. Okay, particularly in languages like English, which is a phonologically obscure, okay, or phonologically opaque. We need a lot of listening activities in order to enhance those reading and writing processes. Also, engaging students in oral activities will help them understand, again, particularly in English, that there is a difference between what is written and what is spoken. Okay, so there are differences there. So oral activities can help us develop or smooth the process of reading and writing. The creation of patterns. Okay, this we're going to deepen on a little bit further on, but the creation of patterns is fundamental because our brain works with patterns, and language itself is very mathematical. Um, the way that we produce language and the way that we handle language is very similar to some mathematical patterns. So the creation of patterns is fundamental when we want our students to read and write successfully. And particularly for phonological awareness, this is fundamental. So, of course, there are exceptions to the rules, to the phonetical rules of languages, but exceptions are not so common and they do not compose most of the language. Okay, that is why they are called exceptions. So the creation of patterns and starting with those common patterns, with the common spelling patterns that languages have and their associations to different sounds, is something that is going to be very important to students. Related patterns to written forms, relating those phonological patterns and those spelling patterns to the way they sound and to the way that they are written, okay, is also one of these implications of phonological awareness. And And this is, again, going back to research, we need to go from syllables to phonemes. And if you take a look at particularly phonics, okay, phonics goes normally from the from the syllable to the phoneme, not the other way around. Why? Because most of the time, the minimal expression of meaning, the smallest expression meaning, is a syllable. In Of course, there are cases in which we can uh, express meaning with a single phoneme. So something like shh, or okay, or something like that can also transmit meaning. But when it comes to words, okay, most of the time we have syllables as being the minimal meaning unit. And as Camilo points out, we need a lot of repetition because repetition is normally the way that we create patterns. Thank you, Camilo, for that. Okay, so particular reading in EFL, as I told you before, that we have a considerable degree of phonetical opaqueness. So the strategies that enhance phonological awareness are fundamental, but also accompanied by comprehension processes. Okay, because we do next to nothing, if we focus only on on developing phonological awareness, if we are not assigning meaning to the words that students are reading. So strategies like story reading and storytelling become very useful strategies for these learners, okay, because they are able to associate the written form of the word, the spoken part of the word, but also its meaning. Okay, so this holy trinity is what makes a reading process successful. Why? Because we need all three. We need all three. We need to know how it is written, of course, because we need to be able to convey meaning with the way that we put letters together. We need to the phonological aspect or the phonetical aspect of the word because we need also to be able to decode it, okay? But we also need the meaning, okay? Because if we know lots of words but we don't know what they means, well, usage is going to reduce to a minimum, okay? Now, other considerations that we need to do, and this is where I want to focus the most. While reading, there is extensive activation bilaterally, meaning in both hemispheres. So there was a preconception some years ago that language was solely located in the left hemisphere, okay? Because this is the hemisphere in which we form the a lot of the patterns that we use for other purposes. But there is activation in both hemispheres. And this is fundamental because it is saying that all of the regions of a lot of the regions of the brain is um, are being involved in this reading process. Okay, so there are brain areas related to audition, vision, spatial and cross-modal processing, and spoken language areas. So we activate some of the same areas when we are speaking and when we are reading and writing. Okay, so again, this is why in these strategies, story reading and storytelling are very useful because we have the same activation or we have activation in similar areas when we are speaking and when we are reading and writing. Also, reading disability has been associated with a common neurobiological marker, the failure to develop a functionally specialized visual word form area in the left hemisphere. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why we have this preconception that I told you before relate to, okay, language is only in the left hemisphere, language is only located here, so if there is a failure in the left hemisphere for whatever reason, we do not have language, and this is not necessarily true. Okay, so there is a very important area, okay, with this neurobiological marker, which is called the visual word form area in the hemisphere, very close to Broca's area, which most of us know. Uh, but that that area, that particular area, is one that, particularly in children, is incredibly plastic and is incredibly flexible. So this area, if it presents any sort of distortion of or trauma or infection, okay, can be substituted by other areas in the brain. Okay, given its plasticity and, as I told you, particularly with children and teenagers. Okay, and this is also the reason why we need a lot of, and as Camilo pointed out earlier, lots of repetition, lots of pattern creation, okay? Because this area, because it is so close, because it is located in the left hemisphere, is going to benefit a lot from pattern creations. Okay, so similar words. Pattern creation, and I want to make a little parenthesis here, it does not necessarily mean that we are going to repeat the same things over and over and over again. Okay? I'm sure that most teachers, if not all, knows this, but pattern creation sometimes also means going out of the same repetition and the same patterns and adding something else every a certain amount of time when the pattern is already automized. Third, reading speed correlates mainly with attentional skills, and this was pointed out before, and reading comprehension with verbal memory. Okay, so in most intellectual coefficient area tests, such as the WISC 4, we have tests that evaluate attentional skills, working memory, perception, coordination, verbal comprehension. Okay, and this is where we have the concept of verbal memory. Okay, so okay, so as Alguera points out, Panner is not repeating the attack words over and over, but helping associations. Exactly. Thank you very much, Algana. So a pattern does not equal repetition, as we both have said. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, that reading speed, okay, correlates mainly with attentional skills, and this is where perception plays a fundamental role as well. The, as I said earlier, perception begins with the movement of the eye. Okay, so reading speed is going to depend also on how quickly our eyes can move. This is basically training in so the more that we read, the faster our eye is going to go. Okay, but it is that perception and that speed of perception is also going to imply that we develop some attentional skills and particularly attentional patterns, okay, that are going to help us sustain our attention, or in some cases, okay, also developing our divided attention. So we are reading, but at the same time, we're using our executive functions to predict on what is going to happen next. And reading comprehension is related to verbal memory. So what happens with verbal memory? Okay, so we have lots of different labels to the types of memories that we have. So we have short-term memory, working memory, long-term memory. We have semantic memory, episodic memory, but I'm going to deepen on that. Verbal memory is associated with both semantic memory, which is the reason why we know that a glass is called a glass or a computer is called a computer and so on, and episodic memory, which is related to the events of our own life. Verbal memory is connected to both. Okay, so we develop verbal memory through our experiences, so through our episodic memory, and take it when we have enough exposure to a particular pattern, take it to a verbal memory. Think about this. When I don't know how many of you have children, but the very first time that my daughter saw a cow, okay, she saw, and she asked me, Mom, what is that? I say, honey, that's a cow. Okay, so she started associating some characteristics. Okay, for the first time in her life, she saw a cow, and she said, oh, all right, this is new for me. What is that? I ask. So this is going through my episodic memory because she was learning for the first time that there was an animal of a certain size with certain characteristics, with a tail, a certain color, with ears. All right. So, okay. And the word for that is cow. Later on, she sees a horse for the first time in her life. And she, look, mom, there's another cow there. So what do I have to do? Sweetie, that is not a cow, that is a horse, because notice that it is different because of this and this. So we start shaping those experiences. Same thing happens in the classroom. Our students are going through some experiences and are learning the differences in those patterns. So after that, my daughter knew that there was a difference between a cow and a horse. Okay. And then she saw a mule and she said, okay, this has like some features from this and some features for that. But mom, so that is not a cow nor a horse. No, that is a mule. Okay. And it has this and this differences. So same thing happens in the classroom. We start with the experiences that happen in our classroom and we start giving them tags and different meanings and different words for this. Okay. So that verbal memory, okay, integrates that episodic and semantic memory, which is why, and as we said before, patterns are not repetition. Patterns are not necessarily repetition. They do require a certain amount of repetition, but it is trying to find common elements and differences between the different words that we have. Finally, the Haynes said that reading is more than putting sounds together, but also deriving meaning from them. So that is why we talked about the Holy Trinity earlier. So we have the way it is written, the phonetical aspect, but also the meaning. Okay. So this is a reason why most areas of the brain are involved, including auditory areas. Okay. And as I said before, even in the case of deaf children, we have those auditory areas activated, intellectual and executive areas. Okay. So again, in recycling, we have executive functions at work, mostly located in our prefrontal cortex, that help us um, predict, contrast, evaluate the things that we are reading in our classrooms. Now, moving on, let's talk a little bit about what does this imply. Okay, so I want you to take a look at the column on the left, on the left, okay, and try to read what is here. Is it very easy for you to read?
No, the color doesn't
Nope.
help.
It does not. It's very hard. It says reading in a very complicated font or color can be really challenging. This has been, I think, most of the um, one of the challenges that we have, especially with teenage girls, when they are going to give us written things and they love their pink and the yellow and their orange colors. Okay, they love color. We all, I mean, most of us love color, but when it comes to a text, it becomes a little bit more problematic. Okay, so we need to have visual considerations when selecting the materials that we're going to read with our students, particularly when we are going to read in digital form. Okay, so right now, in the context of this pandemic, some of us might have given our students a text to read digitally. So we need to consider the color, the size, the spacing, and the font. Okay, because if I put this still in a let's say more standard color or a color that contrasts more with the white background, uh, it's still going to represent a challenge because of the amount of curls and details that this particular font has. Okay, so we need to consider that, and this is especially important with our young learners. Okay, because they are still adapting and are still developing their perception skills, are still associating um, their senses with other areas of the brain. So having them identify very clearly what they are reading is fundamental, especially in young learners. We also need to consider the reading time, considering our students' attentional span. Okay. In the case of children, and I hope that I have some, let's say, preschool or first and second grade teachers here. Okay. How long do your students, your learners, how long can they keep up with a sustained attention for more or less how long?
No more than 10 minutes, and 10 minutes is a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we don't have like very long attentional span, but most reading practices we have very very long reading times. Okay, in which there is sustained attention, in which we are demanding 20 minutes, 30 minutes of sustained attention from our learners. Okay, this is biologically impossible. When we change the focus of attention, and this is why storytelling can be um, a very good tool for us, is because we are changing the focus of attention from what is being written to perhaps some of the images that we have, especially when we handle big books. Okay, so big books have the written part, but they also have plenty of images. So when we switch or when we move from that written form to the images, we are changing the focus of our students' attention. Okay, so we are not demanding from them long attentional spans, or like a book with no words in which we tell the story or we come up with the story ourselves, or maybe we practice it before. But even in books without words, okay, we can switch from one, let's say, particular character to a place to something else, and enhance, okay, and let's say in a way train them to have a longer attentional span, but because we are switching the focus of their attention, even if it is for a few seconds. So if we manage to change, to move from their attention focus, even if it is for a few seconds, we restart the clock of those 10 minutes that you have of sustained attention. And in a way that divide attention, in which we're moving from one attentional focus to the other, is training students because we are still involved in the same activity. So we can get to those 30, 40 minutes of reading, but without losing the attention focus of our students in what is particularly being written. We also need to consider the reading material, creating real life associations to make it more meaningful. Okay, and this is where we go back to Rosalie and Ardila and Matute. Um, what we can associate with our own lives, with our students' lives, is going to be more meaningful. The way in which we present patterns, okay, that are connected to the real experiences of our students' life is going to engage their episodic memory and more and easier smooth that transition into our semantic memory, which is most of the time much more enduring than our episodic memory. A contextual background of the students, exactly. Thank you very much, Oscar. Okay, considering this, okay, is going to help our students develop more meaningful processes, right? Uh, for example, some teachers create big books for their students that are focused on their lives, but giving them different names. This makes reading much more meaningful, okay, for them, and they are going to be able to move those concepts that they acquire in their episodic memory to their semantic memory. And promoting texts that have a certain degree of predictability, because as we said before, we have we have some um, there is involvement of our executive functions. Okay, so we do tend to predict. So promoting texts that have a certain degree of predictability, again, particularly in young learners, it's going to help them develop more smooth and faster reading processes. Now, there is some research, and I want to focus particularly on handwriting because this is, for me, and this is just a personal opinion, the best way to promote good writing processes. Okay, so we have a first quote here that says handwriting production is usually characterized through the handwriting product, that is the spatial accuracy of the written trace, shaping, size, legibility, etc., and through the handwriting processes, that is the movement that generates this trace. Okay, so what happens to handwriting, or what is required from a student when we are going to handwrite something? We need visual skills. Okay, so visual and spatial skills are particularly important, which is why, okay, engaging students in writing at the beginning in a little bit longer or bigger spaces is going to be beneficial, because it's going to allow them to shape or to come to the proportions that they need in order to write something, let's say, in a board or in a wide piece of paper. Okay, so the shape is going to integrate our visual cortex, because of course that we need to know uh, what we are doing. We need to see it. Okay, our visual spatial abilities. Okay, and as well as our motor skills. Okay, so the movement is going to benefit from having a well proportioned space and a well proportioned conception of the space that we have. Okay, I saw several times a meme recently. I saw it again, in which we said um, why visual and spatial skills are important, because we have the beautiful board of Sistema Digestivo. and the TiVo being written there and like very quickly. So what happened there? If the student had handwritten instead of putting or pasting the letters there, he or she could have had a more sensible distribution of the space. Okay? Now, skilled handwriting is characterized by an optimal control of spatial and temporal constraints in order to produce a legible trace as quickly as possible. In spite of his high degree of automation, skilled handwriting requires visual and proprioceptive, tactile, and kinesthetic feedback. I want you to do something for you to understand what is proprioception. Put your hands behind your back, okay, and tell me if without seeing your hands, can you touch your thumb to your middle finger?
Yeah, we can, or at least
We
I
can.
can.
Without I mean, and if we have issues with a proprioception, uh, maybe we should take a look at what is going on in our brain. So it is done, easily done. If we ask this, let's say of a 3-year-old, is going to be a little bit harder, okay? But because he or she is only developing that proprioception. Okay, so what is proprioception and why is it so fundamental to handwriting? Because for handwriting, we use our hands and we need to be able to identify which hand and which fingers are we going to grab the pencil with. Okay, which is why at the beginning, most children, what do? They grab the pen completely with their hand. Okay, but why? This is in part because they are only developing their proper perception, so they need to feel the pencil or the color in their hand before they are able to do it with their fingers. Okay, because if you ask again a 3-year-old, okay, put your hands behind your back and touch your thumb to your middle finger, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for them. Okay, okay, Jose Humberto, you touch your ring finger, but you were able to identify that you didn't touch your middle, but your ring finger. Okay, right? Is that right? Okay, so proprioception and those visual skills, okay, are going to be fundamental when it comes to handwriting. Also, the development of proprioception, okay, not only because of the way that we grab the finger or that we grab um, a pen, a pencil, or whatever, but because that proper perception associated with those visual skills is going to allow us to write without necessarily looking at what is happening. So this is the reason why at the beginning of the writing process, we have children paying a lot of attention and looking very directly at what they are writing. That is why some children tend to do this, to elevate their hand, okay, so they can see what they are writing. Okay, so the more that we develop that proper perception, the easier it's going to be for our students uh, to have that ability of writing, of feeling what they are writing, of distributing over the space that they have without going further and running out of paper, okay, and without necessarily looking at it. Okay, so what does this mean? That we need to provide spaces for students to develop proper perceptive skills. This comes obviously from fine motor skills. So all of the activities that we can do with our hands, handle plaster or clay, maybe teach them to do something particular with their fingers and with their hands, is going to develop that proper perception and it's going to make them better writers. Finally, Dr. Oliver Sacks tells us that dysgraphia, which is the disorder of confusing or having difficulty with the written form of words, without dyslexia is very uncommon. Okay. However, dyslexia without dysgraphia is very common. What does this tell us? We can, and there have been a lot of patients around the world that develop dyslexia for whatever reason, but still continue writing well. Why is this? This tells us about the process of automation of writing. Okay, once we have acquired that proper perception and the distribution um, of those visual aspects of writing, okay, this is going to become a an automatic process, and it's going to be linked to the motor memory of our hands. Okay, so in that motor memory, okay, or that memory that we have to write, okay, automatically, okay, it's the same one that we use when we tie our shoes, or when we are, perhaps some of us that had typewriting lessons at school, that we are able to type without necessarily looking at the computer. I know it's a very envious ability. But once we manage to automate the writing process, it's very, very uncommon or very unlikely that a student will lose that writing skill, okay, that they have worked. Okay? But if they stay in that process of writing in which they need to see what they are writing, this is going to be very difficult. So the more our students write, the more we engage them in writing activities, and particularly in handwriting activities, is going to be a fantastic gym, a fantastic exercise for their brain. However, on the other case, when we have a dysgraphia, it is very, very, very rare that that person does not develop dyslexia. Okay, so that tells us that once we get to that automated process of writing, okay, we might we might keep it, even if we lose the ability to read. Now, um, sorry, there is something here. Um, Okay, so what are the implications for this? Visual games and activities benefit the process of writing. Okay, so writing words on the board, writing things on big spaces, trying to cooperate with other people in order to write, okay, is a great exercise for our brain and for the writing process. And particular early stages, the students need to feel what they write. So including activities that involve kinesthetic and proprioceptive skills, as I told you before, are necessary, right? Because this is the way in which we are going to get to that automated process of writing. All right, so finally, I just want to focus a little bit on this, which is emotions of writing. Some students with emotional and behavioral disorders struggle with maintaining focus, making the multitask function of writing difficult. Okay, so this tells us that the more emotionally involved that we are in a writing process, the more successful it's going to be. Okay, so again, bringing writing exercises that are meaningful, that are related to our students' lives and to their emotions, to what they feel, is going to be an emotional boost that is going to strengthen their attentional skills, right? And students, again, students with emotional and behavioral disorders are capable of providing meaningful feedback, okay? And this was a beautiful project made by Primary Mason in 2014, in which students with this kind of disorders were giving peer revision and peer feedback to their classmates, okay? And they discovered that they were able to give a peer revision to their classmates, but because they knew and they were involved in some of the same difficulties of their classmates. The placement of the peer revision conference after planning and before writing a complete response may have improved end product and increased motivation. So we cannot separate emotions from writing, because when we write, it's meaningful for us and for our students. This is going to generate more effective and more meaningful, because the limbic system that is so closely related to mnemonic processes, to memory processes, is going to benefit from this, okay? Because they are managing their emotions, they are understanding what they are writing, and is going to be much more, again, much more meaningful and much more memorable in our brain. Okay, so not only memorable because it was meaningful and beautiful and interesting or whatever, but because this and this association of the limbic system with our memory is going to make that writing more effective and more durable in our brain. All right, so how to include emotions? So allow students to write about what they want. Promote peer writing and peer revision. It allows students to write together. Even in early stages, students can come up with with stories about their playgrounds, about their families, about the things that they live, and engage students in multitasking activities that include writing. Okay, so a scavenger's hunt, okay, a search, a particular search, a project that includes writing, okay, but that also includes other type of activities and other type of sources for meaning, is going to benefit, because writing itself is a multitask process. Okay. So these are some of my references, and I thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Professor Claudia Suescun, for accepting our invitation to open this set of webinars that we are going to have every Thursday. We are going to, not every Thursday, sorry, the last Thursday of every month. So you are welcome to join us, and please check our social networks so to see who is our next presenter and to check the topics. So I don't know if we have any questions here. Meanwhile, we are going to get some quick words from Adriana. She's going to share some very interesting and exciting news from our organization.
Well, thank you very much, Claudia. As everybody's saying in the chat, this was a very interesting reminder and also brought to us many new ideas. I would like to share with you some very important news from Asocopy. This year, Asocopy has started this wonderful project. Give me 1 second. Here it is. Asocopy is very glad to launch today, after our first very successful and interesting webinar, the good news of our first diplomado en estrategias de fortalecimiento de enseñanza del inglés. This diplomado is, well, as the information you can see is in Spanish. This is not only for teachers who are English teachers, but teachers who are in charge of teaching English in both private and public institutions. We're going to have the diplomado in 120 hours with 4 different models. These models are distributed in a way in which you're going to have the vacation time frame that you usually have, and you will have time also to devote to the diplomado, synchronic and asynchronic as well. And we have 2 diplomados, one for teaching English to children, oriented for teachers in preschool and primary, and another one for teaching to youngsters. These 2 diplomados are divided per age, because we know that the needs of our population are different. And because Asocopy is aware that the real battlefield in education is happening in school, is happening and with the teachers that need to go and work with students and need to implement so many strategies foundations, engagement, reading, writing, and developing materials for your students. So we invite you to visit our, not only our media, but also our webpage, in which you are going to find all the information. Diplomados are coming very soon. We're waiting for you so we can have the chance to be part of your professional development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you, Professor Claudia. Again, we are getting a lot of thanks here in the chat. Professor Claudia also shared her email address in the chat box in case you want to contact her, or if you have any questions. I can see any question here.
I believe that Juan Carlos Gordillo was raising his hand.
Okay,
Perhaps
okay,
has
okay.
something?
Yeah, so before we finish, so we can...
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Juan Carlos.
Thanks a lot for the interesting lecture that you have given to us. No, I just want to add that was what you said. For example, you mentioned something that we need to about handwriting, and I love that part because it is essential also to develop our students some cognitive processes that are just like focused specifically in writing. I will say, for example, reorganization, elaboration, and retrieval. And as you stated, it's important to make them write, or that they have the chance, if you want to call it like that, to write what they want. Because an example, note taking, or when you do a free recall of some activity. So I think that will help to improve those cognitive processes, specifically related to writing, reorganization, elaboration, and retrieval. Just want to highlight that part that I found interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Yeah, Professor Claudia?
No, I was just thanking Juan Carlos for his contribution.
Okay, I was just going to read one comment from Camilo Dominguez. He said, thank you, Claudia, for helping us to remember that the brain plays a key role in the process of learning a language, while there are other approaches to literacy development besides this cognitive approach. We will always have our brain mediating in our teaching and learning process. Kudos. Thank you, Camilo.
Thank you, Camilo. And it's absolutely true. There cannot be learning if we didn't have this wonderful machine above our heads.
Okay, so thank you very much again to all the people who attend this wonderful webinar. And remember that you are invited to join us next April 29. We will have Professor Jairo Castañeda from Universidad Surcolombiana. So you are welcome to join us again. So thank you very much, and we hope you all have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Claudia. Goodbye.